Alright, this is going to be part 2 of my question and answers video. Pretty much realize that means that a lot fewer people will watch this one than the first one. But the other one was almost an hour long, and then I had to go take care of something, and it would have been way too long. I don't even think my equipment here allows me to go over an hour. So where I left off was the sauce had asked what I thought about seasteading. Seasteading is a good idea. I hope they try it. I hope it works. I don't think it's enough in and of itself. I think the idea that we're going to create this shining beacon on a hill and it's going to change everything is false, because we already have really good examples in history. So it won't be like a panacea, although every point of light is useful. So more examples we have, the better. Of course, it's always good to have, just practically speaking, options for people to go to. You know, if it really got off the ground, I'd be interested in going, under the right circumstances. But I think that practically states are going to look at them, and it doesn't matter what the international law is. I know they'll say, well, international waters, blah, blah, blah. Uh, States respect that when they don't have anything to lose. So if you're out there in a kayak or something, or something so minor they don't care about, then sure, they're not going to violate international waters or international law. But if they feel threatened, or if they want to take something, then they will. And so uh, there's no defense in that. You're going to have the protection of some state, either explicitly because some state says, okay, we allow it, or in effect, maybe in the disputed area between two states, and neither state is willing to allow the other one to dominate you. I think the more powerful or the more effective seasteading becomes, the more likely there'll be intercision by this or another state. I mean, the same thing is like these cities in Honduras. First of all, they're not totally free market, because they're putting provisions in there that you have to hire so many Hondurans. There still are taxes, although much less and far less regulation. But if they ever became really nice tax havens and lots of people were going there, either the Honduran government would say, well, gosh, there's an awful lot of wealth there to be had, which they would be very, very unlikely to resist in the long run. I mean, you might have it not for some time. And the other thing is, other states, in that case specifically the United States government, would say, okay, we've got a lot of wealthy Americans there. That's money we want. We don't like them thwarting, and they really hate it when you circumvent them, whether it be in a city in Honduras or seasteading, and they will try and clamp down on it to the degree that they can. Now, they're not omniscient and they're not omnipotent, so that's usually somewhat limited. There's always little fish who can escape, but I just don't. It's a great idea. I hope they go through with it. I hope we have lots of little seasteading institutes in the Free State Project. But I really think it's wrong to think that it's the way. We need to have an ideological shift, and we're getting one. It's moving in fits and starts, and it doesn't have to be total. I'm not one who thinks we have to have everybody believe in it, but the more people we do, the better. And seasteading is a step in that direction, but it doesn't, get us. There isn't. I don't think that there is a silver bullet to that, though I'm always looking. So, all right, next question. Does dyslexia make reading difficult, or do you only juxtapose letters when writing? What do you think is the most likely and most effective? Okay, well, let me answer that first one first. I have never, to my knowledge, been officially diagnosed with dyslexia, although I know when I was very young, I was diagnosed with certain, um, I don't even know what they were, educational or developmental impairments. I was actually held back a year. I finished kindergarten. I basically failed kindergarten and had to, in my school district, there was something called junior first, which is basically between kindergarten and first grade. I did that. And so then after that year, then I went to first grade. So the kids who were in kindergarten ended up being, the kids in my kindergarten class ended up being, I was a year behind them for the rest of school. And it was weird because there were literally retarded kids in my kindergarten class who did not go to junior first, but I did. I mean, like literally retarded kids. Uh, so I never even occurred to me that this might be a problem. When I was in college, I was in a history class that I just took for fun. wasn't part of my major, and I turned in a test where basically I had to write a lot. The whole test was just writing in those blue books, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. And when the test got returned, the teacher was like, "I need to talk to you." And he said, "Everything. Look, you have all the right answers. You obviously know this stuff very well." I mean, he was the guy. I was a music major actually, and he kept saying I should be a history major. But he goes, "I do you have dyslexia because everything here is spelled backwards?" And if any of you have had the opportunity to talk with me in text comments, you'll know I'm a terrible speller. And I kind of always joke that's from public schooling, but I don't think that's it. So I'm a terrible speller. I have trouble phonating certain words, and I don't hear certain sounds uh, very well. It's not. I don't have any trouble reading, um, and if I have a word perfect, I'm a pretty good writer, but it will be spelled terribly wrong if I'm writing stuff out without spell check, which I think most of you will realize if you read my comments. Even sometimes the descriptions and stuff I'll put to videos are spelled wrong. And one thing I noticed, uh, so the B and the V sound basically sound the same to me. I think there's a couple others. There's a character in Dragon Ball Z whose name is Berter. He's on the Ginyu Force, and I cannot hear his name as Berter. When I hear it, I hear Verter with a V sound. I've watched it. I have it on DVD. I've watched it knowing that, and I still cannot hear it as a B. I hear it as a V, and I figured this out because I was trying to figure out his power level one time, and I would go online. I type Verter, Ver, something like that, and it would never come back, and it would come up this Berter character. Who's Berter? So there are sounds that there are certain. I guess they're all consonants that they sound the same to me. I can't tell the difference, but it's not. It's not inhibiting. I never have trouble communicating with people or speaking. Most people seem to think I'm pretty well spoken and articulate, but you can tell in my spelling that's terrible. So I think I do have some kind of speech impediment. I know I had them when I was younger. I guess I still do, but it hasn't seemed to impact me very much. I mean, with word processors and stuff, it's really not a big deal anymore. So I don't think that it's really held me back at all. What do you think is the most likely and most effective means of making a more libertarian society? If not, it, it definitely has to be an ideological shift, and I think the most important way that happens, the most practically effective way I've seen that, unfortunately, is not anything that we can proactively do. It is the government discrediting itself. There's a lot of libertarians in Eastern Europe, and it's because their governments discredited them. In Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Bulgaria, Czech Republic. There's a lot of people in the UK who are libertarians who lived through or are aware of the really bad hyper socialistic times before Margaret Thatcher, which is not to cast her as a perfect free market person, but the government is its worst enemy in a lot of ways, and it's our best recruiting. I think there's been this upsurge in libertarianism, and part of it is Ron Paul, but actually I think even his movement is itself dependent on this enormous anti-government sentiment that has come up because of the bailouts, the wars, and several other factors. So the government is really our number one recruiting tool. And that's like, to me, that how did I become a libertarian? It's because I watched the government kill a whole bunch of people on television, and I was like, oh, that's not good. I mean, it wasn't some eloquent speech by Will Grigg or Scott Horton or Ron Paul or anything I read from Murray Rothbard. It was watching a church burned to the ground with 70 children in it, or 70 people in it, dozens of children. And it's the war, it's the drone strikes, it's the imprison, it's the TSA fucking groping people. That's what's making people libertarian. There's definitely a backlash, and the more immediate and visceral it is, the more effective. So, for someone like me who's a history buff and who likes to read about other places, and people say libertarians are cold and calculated. I feel like I'm a very empathetic person, and I can read about what the Tsar was doing or what Stalin was doing or Hitler or Pol Pot, and I can be like, man, that is really bad. Even though I don't have any visceral firsthand experience there, I can be like, that is fucked up, and I can take those principles and apply them here. I'm like, okay, well, it didn't work there, it's not going to work here. Most people are just not that uh, theoretical in their thinking. I mean, everyone's capable of it, and everyone does it to an extent. But when that stuff happens here, it has a much bigger effect. So I'm not encouraging the government to do bad things. Just pragmatically, that seems to be what changes the most people's minds. Let's see, what else does he say? Do you hate me? Oh wait, how often do you use firearms for drills and target shooting? Not nearly enough. Like when I'm at work, I really can't, and I'm at work most of the time. I'm getting to the point where I have the means to do it. I have the money. When I was in college, I just did not have the money to shoot very much. I slowly acquired guns, which I encourage everyone to do, and I have a membership at a range, and I should go there probably every day. I'm not home, but it's been real hard. Do you hate me because my firearms are both Russian? He has an SKS and a Mosin Nagant. Okay, Mosin Nagants were invented in Belgium. The SKS is a copy of the Sturmgewehr rifle that the Germans invented. The Soviet Union really didn't invent anything. They just stole shit or bought shit from other countries. This is the case with their guns. So I would never want a Mosin Nagant. I just think they're ugly and stupid, but they're not actually Soviet or Russian. SKS is actually a great gun. There's no doubt about that. I don't like the caliber, so I wouldn't buy that unless I could get one that was chambered in .308, which apparently is possible. In fact, if I do get another gun, that will likely be what I want. But I always will just say, no, well, it's actually not a Soviet gun. It is a German gun. Will libertarians take over the high seas or some landmass? I don't know. Maybe eventually. I think that in the longer run, the more likely. Also, if we ever do get to interstellar space travel, I think there's a very good chance that it would happen then. The Libertarian asks, what is your greatest pleasure in life, and what is your greatest fear? I think the greatest pleasure in life is to triumph. I always like doing that to the degree that I've been able to. I think that's a great feeling. And greatest fear besides death would be to lose my individuality. That's actually something I think is different about me. People say, are you genetically libertarian? I have always had a phobia about having my personality and my individual existence obliterated by some collective whole, even when I was a very, very little kid. I don't know why. A good example of this would be like when I used to be in marching band, and I'd be at a football game, and of course that's a very tribalistic, like it's our team, their team, and I think in a lot of ways sports is like a vicarious way to relive the Neolithic hunter-gatherer. Instead of chasing a boar or an animal, they're chasing a ball, but it's very hyper masculine. I mean, I like that part, but I could feel like this emotional urge to um, submit to the greater authority, to the collective, and that impulse I was revolted by. And this is a long time before I had any kind of explicit libertarian rhetoric or training or understanding. I mean, I didn't even know the word. I had some anti-government ideas, but I mean, even before that, even when I was like 5, 6, I remember like shows like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or some idea where the Borg and Star Trek. To me, that is like the most horrible thing I can imagine. So, uh, and I wonder if that's. I don't see anything in my life that would, say, oh, when I was a kid, the Borg tried to assimilate me, and that's why I'm afraid of it. And I don't know if that's genetic or not. I wonder about that, but I just don't have any answers. But yeah, so there you go. Who wins in a fight? Zombified Rothbard or Mecha Hazlitt? I think Rothbard just always wins, regardless of what iteration he's in. Would you donate your sperm to a sperm bank? I considered doing that for a while, but the money's just not worth it. If you had to have sex with with a woman, any woman, who would it be? Actually, no, I never ever thought about that really. uh, a wife, any woman, any intelligent, good-looking woman who would be willing to have multiple children with me would meet that criteria. And if they were famous, that would be great. If not, it wouldn't matter. Do you think it's okay for a 30-year-old man to have sex with a 13-year-old boy if consent is provided? 7-year-old boy. If consent is provided, absolutely. I don't think that that's a problem. I don't think that we can set I think it's arbitrary to set year ages. This is for consent in anything, not just homosexual relations. This is heterosexual relations. This is jobs. This is everything. Uh, I think that there is no magic formula to decide when moral agency is reached, and I think that the thing that we have to defer to is the assertions of the individual. So, if a 13-year-old boy says, "I want to have sex with a 30-year-old, my 30-year-old boyfriend or whatever," then that needs to be taken seriously. Now, there can be a debate. You could say, well, maybe the 30-year-old is somehow manipulating him, or maybe he threatened him. Maybe he said he'd kill his entire family if he said other, which is apparently a very common uh, method that's used by sexual predators, is to basically threaten not the person but the family or the friends of somebody. So that's something you can talk about. But if a person, child or not, is asserting consent, then I think that needs to be at the very least taken very seriously. Could a 7-year-old do that? I think a 7-year-old can do that in some circumstances. Uh, as far as I'm concerned, 7 is a little bit young, so I'm not too eager to try it out. 13 is a little bit young for me too, but I don't know. I'm not sure if this question is meant more as a theoretical discussion of the age of consent and the rights of children, which one of the very first videos I ever made was about that, which I'm sure no one's watched because no one watches my early videos. Or if this is a question about my own sexual preferences, uh, or maybe both. Just my sexual preferences have changed with me. Whatever age I was, that's what I was most interested in. So when I was a little kid, that's what I was most interested in. And I didn't think older guys were that interesting. And then as I got older, I got more interested in older guys, and that's just continued my entire life basically. Although, like, it's kind of like a homosexual Keynesianism where there's sticky. You know how the wages don't rise. There's a sticky. What's the word? I don't want to even make up a term for that because it would be really homoerotic. But yeah, I mean, this is something that cannot be known. This is something there have to be arbitration. If someone had sex with a 7-year-old and let's say, for instance, that the 7-year-old says, "Well, I consent," and say the parents of the 7-year-old say, "Well, he says he consents," and everybody who's directly involved says there's consent, and there's no dispute, there's no reason to go to arbitration, and so there's no argument. What more likely is, say a 7-year-old gets an older boyfriend and starts having sex with an older boy. This could be or an older girl. I mean, it doesn't. The homosexual element is kind of just irrelevant. Uh, and let's say the kid says he likes it, but his parents say otherwise. Then what? Well, we have a dispute in that case, and that means you have to go to arbitration, and you have to talk about it with an arbiter. And that's when you start pulling out the child psychologists and the Murray Rothbard libertarian theories and history, and you start really analyzing. That's when you get a neurologist to come and tell, can a 7-year-old decide this or not? Can this, not just a 7-year-old, this 7-year-old, what you have to have arbitration for that if there's a dispute. If there's no dispute, there's no point. I think law only can arise through disputes. When there's no dispute, there's no point in even talking about whether it's right or not. And if there is a dispute, you have to take it case by case. So that's the long answer to a short question. Which part of the collapse are you most worried about? Well, I don't know the specific nature of what this collapse is going to be like. I think the number one threats are going to be what the government does in a reaction to them and what my neighbors do. And this is one of the best reasons to do things like join the Free State Project or start your own, which I'm very seriously considering, kind of getting my own enclave. because if your neighbors agree with you and they are prepared, then you are several orders of magnitude in a better position than if they are not. The guns, and I was talking this to my uncle, who unfortunately is somewhat of a neocon, uh, but he's a survivalist also, and he's fucking loaded in terms of guns and ammo and food and all that. And he's like, the chances that I use any of this against the government are pretty slim. The chances that I have to use this against my neighbors are less slim. In which case, though, his neighbors are in trouble. How do we stop the collapse? I don't think you can stop the collapse. I don't think I can stop the collapse. All we can do is build our own lifeboats, and enough people have lifeboats, there'll be society left over. Like I said, we should also always hope for the best, plan for the worst, and that's all you can really do. I mean, and get it out there that it's going to happen. All right, this is not a question. This is a demand. It says, make a video about the phenomenon on how people like the free market for the benefits it brings, but don't want the free market when it bundles things opposed to their interests. That's honestly, I think that's a bit of a vague question. I actually don't know very many people. People in their rhetoric, even when it's not consistent, tend to be in favor of free markets or not in favor of free markets. And I know it's inconsistent because there are conservatives who say they favor it, but then if you look at their policies, they favor all kinds of things that aren't free market. And on the other hand, liberals who are against the free market, they actually favor a lot of things that are free market. And so most people don't rhetorically cast themselves this way. So there's this middle ground consensus that the market's good for some things, but there has to be government involvement to basically steer a steady course or prevent disaster. The middle ground, the mixed economy, the interventionist domestic policy, and that's kind of what the Democrats and the Republicans both officially believe in, but I don't think it works. But most people, I don't think, really talk that way. The anti-SPLC, how do you feel about gay pride parades and the like? I really don't care. I've never gone to one. I have no interest in going to one. I don't like camp. I don't like flaunting. If they want to do it, obviously they can. There's a whole question of the public and the private roads, and we should just not have public roads. And then there's literally nothing to discuss. If you have a private road and you want to allow a gay pride parade, end of story. If you don't want to allow a gay pride parade, end of story. This is only a question when we have public roads, and that should not be a question because we should not have public roads. What is the origin of your username? That's a long story. I started using YouTube, and for a long time I would just watch it. I wasn't even, I didn't have an account. I wasn't posting videos. I wasn't posting comments. Eventually, out of frustration of seeing stupid things and hearing stupid things, I wanted to comment, and at one point I had a different username, but I used it very infrequently. In fact, I think at the time I had it, I didn't even have internet where I lived. I had to use it by walking to a library that was 3 miles from my house, and so naturally I didn't use it very often. And one day I was trying to do something and I could not remember my username or anything, so I had to make up a new one. And just that day I had been studying Icelandic kind of heavily, and the way I did that was by watching, I found a YouTube channel that is made by some kids. They're not kids anymore, they're all about 20. This was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, so they were kids then. I don't know if this makes it worse or better, but it's one of the few channels I could find where there are native Icelandic speakers just speaking normally. There's not that many people in Iceland, so they don't produce a ton of videos. But this is one YouTube channel where they would do. It was mostly, in fact, the name of the channel was I Stupid. Just they would do stupid things, and they had a series. One of the best interviews, one of the best videos was one called in Iceland. It's called the Maturin, which in you translate that means the market. But they were basically doing interviews. They would interview their friends and they'd ask them a series of questions. You know, what's your name? How old are you? That sort of thing. And I was watching this, and it's kind of cool because you're watching it and you're slowly figuring out what the questions are, what the answers are. And uh, I, my username comes from there. I don't want to say exactly, but uh, and it's not obvious because there are people from Iceland who have seen my username, and I pronounce it for them, and it took even them a couple seconds to oh. So if anyone's really curious, I can show them the video, and they can probably figure it out because I was able to figure it out, and I'm not like some kind of linguistic genius. But that's what it's an anglicized spelling of a slang Icelandic question. It is a question in Icelandic. Icelandic has different letters, so there's no the th sound is spelled with a th letter, but that is the origin of my username, and it was a long time ago, and it was kind of just the spur of the moment. I needed to have a username to make a comment or something, and that ended up becoming my username uh, years later. So there wasn't a real. It wasn't like I significantly was like, what name means something like. No, it was just some. I was like, oh, I know what that means, and it was okay. You'll understand this, but it was on my mind a lot. I don't. This is just gonna get weird to answer this fully, so I'm not going to. What is your opinion of agorism? I've heard you talk. I think agorism is great. It's just the idea that it's basically anarcho-capitalism put into action to just do black and gray market activities. I do this to an extent. Porkfest is about this to a huge extent. It's a good idea. It's not a cure-all, but I think it's really effective. It's something that also happens a lot by people who are not at all even rhetorically libertarians, but they're just looking after their own interests. So that's good. I don't think Samuel Konkin III really contributed much originally. He's emphasizing ideas that were already pretty well alliterated, and he just was saying, hey, let's go with this. So what's your opinion on social anarchists claiming a monopoly on the word anarchist? I think it's hilarious and ironic that a whole bunch of people who are all about democracy and the common good are going to be definition Nazis. Uh, when you say libertarian in America, it means one thing, and it's not Noam Chomsky. And there's way more people who understand it that way than our anarcho-syndicalists or anarcho. And part of what I think is going on here is the anarcho-socialists are not willing, and I think certainly not even able to actually debate libertarians. To come and actually debate, they really can't do it. They are literally speaking in Marxian terms. They are talking in mid 19th century rhetoric. That's all their bullshit, wage slavery, exploitation, blah blah blah. This is like caveman shit. And like modern American libertarians are 150 years more advanced than that. And so what do they do instead is be bitches about the word. That's not even an argument. Fine, you want to change the name, you want to call us neoliberals or whatever. Fine, I don't care. But that doesn't mean that like consensus-based majoritarianism is a good idea, or that democracy is a panacea, or that mutual exchange is coercive because you don't like the terms, or any number of other stupid fallacies. There's no objective theory of value that can make the expropriation of property justifiable. So instead, they just say you're not really libertarian. Uh, I think it's just demonstrates the utter impoverishment of their ideology and their intellect in almost all cases. There's a few of them who aren't retarded, but by and large they are, and they're super emotional. What is or are the first libertarian anarchist thinkers in your opinion? Gosh, I'm sure that there were some a long time ago. I've heard people say that Hesiod was. I know there are some Chinese thinkers, although I'm not familiar with them at all. Um, I think that there's a good claim that Aristotle is usually considered the first libertarian. You can probably, someone's going to bitch that he believed in slavery and all that, but I mean, that's my understanding. I don't think it's really important to know the etymology of where arguments are coming from. It's much more important to know the arguments, because bad people can make good arguments. Even if Aristotle did own slaves, that doesn't mean he's wrong. This is the same thing about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson's a minarchist. He's for limited government, even perhaps for anarchism in some of the things he write. And to say, well, he had slaves, he raped his slaves. which is not necessarily true, but let's just assume that it is. Well, maybe that makes Thomas Jefferson an asshole, but that doesn't mean, or a hypocrite, which I think is the worst thing you can be, pretty much. But that doesn't mean that his argument is wrong. So I don't care that much. It's interesting. Maybe I'll study it, but I'm not someone who goes through and, oh, here's Benjamin Tucker and here's Emma Goodman and or Goodman and blah. It's like, if they have interesting arguments, then I want to read them, but I don't necessarily see any reason in categorizing them and saying, okay, here's the hierarchy and here's who first. So you'd have to go back to the classics, and if not before. Blah blah. Would you sleep with my sexy socialist, Miss Sexy Socialist, if it meant you got to sleep with Philip Vegas? Thank you, Gamba God, for asking me that question. I thought about this, and I would say, yes, definitely. You only live once. I would want to do her first, and then him second, like with some time between to like block out the memories. And yeah, definitely. I mean, Philip is really, really hot, and I'm almost. He's actually watched my channel before because I did book reviews on his books, and I forwarded to him. And he's a little bit of a narcissist, and I know that he likes to get credit. And I like to give him credit. I highly doubt he's going to watch this, but I really like Philip Vegas. His books are good, by the way, and I recommended both of them. And he is very fine, and I would to miss that that's a chance I would pay a very high price for that. And Miss Sexy Socialist, that would be a high price, but I mean, it might do her some good to get fucked by a libertarian. So, the world would probably, I'm sure the world would be a better place, probably, in my opinion. And how do people know I like Philip so much? Like, I don't talk about him that often. It's just, I have a feeling I told like one person, and then it's like, hey, did you know that Link the Unearther, he likes Philip Vegas? Uh, have you ever seen the documentary called The Take? No, I have not. Do you feel like you were persuaded towards libertarianism by arguments over time, or that you felt innately libertarian and the arguments made? For a long time I would have said it was arguments, it was experience, it was empirical data. I'm beginning to question that because the time frame that I really started to drift first towards minarchism and then towards libertarianism, it really coincides with that age when you start to become a much more rational person. When children can think, but there starts to become a point where you start to be much more able to integrate and manipulate abstract thinking into your worldview. And the timing for me, it seems about right, where that's when I started to become libertarian. So either just coincidentally I started to impact libertarian arguments at that time, or as soon as I became that way, I started to drift in that direction. So I don't actually know for sure. Uh, have you always had your calm style while addressing arguments, or is that something you've worked on? Do you still get angry and reply to people on forums and stuff in a pissy way, or would you say you're generally pretty zen? I do not think of myself as zen. I do get mad. I will make comments, especially with socialists. Just recently, I made probably 3 or 4 hours of vids that were basically therapeutic because of comment wars I had with several totally inane, godforsaken socialists. And kind of my policy there is you make the argument. If they don't go for the argument, then I am not above personal attacks at that point, and I'll just blow them off and be like, fuck you, you're going to hell, you Stalinist. Like, go kill millions of Chinese people with your collective food policy or some other thing. And then what I will do is when I get a comment reply, I will not even look at it. I will not even open it. I'll just put that behind me. Because I've wasted days on comment wars, and who wants to do that? And my style is not consistent. I think that part of it is some people get on YouTube and they start making videos, I think, prematurely to when they haven't really looked at it that much. They become persuaded, which is great, and they're impassioned, which is great, but they haven't quite read enough. They're not quite as articulate as maybe they could be, and so it comes across as a little shrill. For me, I'd been an ANCAP for years and years. When did I start making videos? Almost 2 years ago now. Well, okay, so that was 2000. It was the beginning of 2011. Well, I've been an ANCAP for 7 years by then, 6 or 7 years. So, I had already done all the stupid arguments and everything before that. Which channels do you most look forward to seeing new videos from on YouTube? There's several channels that I think are fantastic that almost never make videos anymore. Some of the first ones I subscribe to have been basically essentially defunct uh, for years. Um, One that comes to mind right away is a channel called Liberty is Not Given. He just made great videos. He's from Arkansas, and he had this nice Southern accent, but very, very analytical. And his videos tended to be like poetry to me. But then he kind of shifted to doing mostly atheism videos, which just I find really boring. He did a good job, and then they just petered out, and I don't think he's made a video in a year or two. Another one is a guy named Libertarian. He was in law school. He's a great Misesian. He's the one who explained to me the idea of marginal utility in labor, on why wages. Like that was one of the things I was worried about. What keeps wages from going to zero? And I found his video, and he explained it very, very well, and very, very articulate. He's got a Southern accent as well. He significantly, people might not know him. He actually is one of the guys who converted Fringe Elements to become a libertarian. Fringe Elements was originally, well, when I first encountered Fringe Elements, he was going by the name Stuttles. I don't think that was the original incarnation, but this was probably in 2008. And I had already known of Austro Libertarian for a year or two, and I first encountered Stuttles because the two of them were having basically back and forth YouTube debates. So that's a guy who actually helped convert Suttles. I've heard Suttles say he attributes Stefan Molyneux, but I was seeing a back and forth, and Austro Libertarian was annihilating Stuttles. And again, he slowly slipped into making atheist videos, and he comes from an evangelical background, but he slipped into making atheist videos, and they just petered out, and I don't think he's made one in over a year, and that one was the first one he made in several years. So, and I've posted on both their channels that I would love to see them make more videos, and they just don't. Now the other one who was in that trifecta, I already mentioned in the first one, I subbed to Neilcio, but Neilcio, he doesn't make many of himself, and so I really like the vlogging style, because then you get to see the person and all their mannerisms, and you understand it a lot more than if it's just a presentation. It was him, and the other one, and he still makes videos, but not on the type I like, is Ex Omniverse. I've really been a big fan of Ex Omniverse right from the start, and when I first was watching him, he was an anarchist and an objectivist. And he's gotten past that, and he still makes videos regularly, but now they're about exercise, and he talks about philosophy, which is interesting, but he did some excellent socialist slapdown, government slapdown, statism slapdown videos. And with all of these guys, I think what happens is they just get tired of it. It's like, okay, how many times do I have to hear about the roads? It's like the cliche libertarian argument that we've heard so many times. And I think these guys just got tired, and they either stopped making videos altogether, or in the case of Ex-Omniverse, they don't really address politics or economics really very much anymore, even though their positions haven't changed. As in, well, I mean, they're probably the type of person whose ideas are always evolving, but they haven't like reneged on their belief in libertarianism. And I think what we have to realize is that we have to be really patient. Not I mean, Liberty is not given. I'll make a 40-minute video about Monopoly. He would make like a 2.5 or a 3-minute video about Monopoly, and all the arguments are right there. They're very succinct. It's well phrased. It's fucking like poetry. It's just logically consistent, and and he'll put little spices of empiricism in there, and it's all logically contained. But that's too dense for a lot of people. And you do it once, and then a month later, people are asking to do it again, and you just don't. But we have to realize that there are always new people coming on. There are people who never saw your early videos, just like I have lots and lots of, I was making a lot of videos a year and a half, 2 years ago, and nobody saw. You go back, you'll see that there's a dozen views, 80 views, and so I don't have any problem with redoing subjects because I have a bigger audience now, and I want them to hear the same stuff. And these guys, I mean, to them, it's like, I already figured this out. I already said it. What more do you want from me? And of course, they're not obligated to say anything, but I think they could contribute a lot more in that area. Now, Omniverse still makes videos, but Liberty is not given, and Austro-Libertarian, they both have channels. Go check out their videos. There's a couple other. I wish Podrag would make videos. He's the Scottish Libertarian. I met him at Porkfest. He's a great guy. He's a very interesting guy. He doesn't meet a lot of the stereotypes of what a libertarian is. And his videos were really good, but he took them all down, I think, because of employment, pretty much. But those are really good. I always, would like to see them. And there's, gosh, those are the big ones. Um, I think I have 300 or 400 subscriptions. Most of them were people like, okay, that's good, but I don't watch them all. Uh, but those guys, I mean, really incredible. So if you've never, and they're old. I mean, they haven't been doing videos now for years. So if you kind of knew this, you probably never encountered them. So I definitely recommend looking them up. I'd have to look, and the other thing is the subscription list. They originally were chronological, so you'd see, when you subscribe to people. And, when I first got a channel, I subscribed specifically to uh, the ones I value the most, and now they're all out of order, so it'd be actually harder for me to find them all. Blah, blah, blah. Gosh, that was a long answer. Here's a question for your show. It's not really a show. Whatever. What do you think about attempts by Hans Hermann Hoppe, Stefan Molyneux et al. To prove anarcho-libertarianism through appeals to some kind of objective morality? I like it. I'm glad they do it. I think it's interesting. I am not convinced of objective morality. I like the idea. I don't think that it's wrong to dabble in it and to look at it seriously. Actually, one of the most interesting things I read was about rights, and it was by Roderick Long, and I didn't finish it because it was too long and I was busy. I really should go back to that. I don't know if we can prove a person owns his body, but I know for sure that if we can't do that, we can't prove that a collective owns a body. And so I think it is a good way to just refute the whole collective ownership, which is really the genesis of all common good bullshit. Is, oh, there's some kind of collective ownership of either your person or all things, and that's just clearly bullshit, and it doesn't work in utilitarian grounds. It's a disaster. I'm just saying ANCAP for primarily principled or practical reasons. I would say that I am currently for practical reasons, but it was moral arguments that got me a long way. It was moral arguments that got me into a very strict minarchism, and then it was practical arguments that made me give up the idea of a state, because I don't think it practically actually does provide us with defense. Defense itself at our expense. Sometimes their interests and ours do align occasionally, usually vis-a-vis the aggression of other states. But, what's the point? I mean, am I so lucky that the United States government is taxing me relative to if the Canadian government was? I just don't see that as any kind of beneficial trade-off at all. And this guy used to be a minarchist for more practical than principled reasons, blah, blah, blah. This is him just talking. Yeah, I think, and really, morality, I think, has to be practical anyway, so I don't know. I mean, if someone came and said, I have devised this exact this deontology, and it's 100% logical, and it's 100% true, and then like the result is I'm supposed to die, then I'm like, I'm just going to live with falsehood then. Oh man, this is a long one. As a former member of the Zeitgeist movement, I was converted to anarcho-capitalism by Stefan Molyneux's interview with V Radio. where he asked the question, in the absence of price, how do you rationally allocate resources? Stefan asked this several times and was not met with a direct answer. The host, Neil Kiernan, another senior of the Zeitgeist movement, Douglas Millett, stated that resources. Okay, I saw this interview also. It was a great interview. Steph was at kind of his best. He could have done a few other things a little bit better, but this is one of his best interviews. Those guys are creepy motherfuckers. Douglas Millett, I believe, is an engineer at NASA, and he makes stupid arguments like everyone should have titanium chairs that last forever because, God forbid, anyone get a cheaper chair that doesn't last forever because they value something else more than a chair that lasts forever. I mean, literally, who would be willing to spend 100 times more price or cost on something that's going to outlive your life? It's so conceited, it's unbelievable. And yes, they were saying it's possible to allocate resources. There already are programs out there that can figure that out. And Stefan correctly pointed out, yes, there are. And all of those programs use as their primary input mechanism price. They input prices, and that's what they use. So you're going to abolish prices. So what's your primary input going to be? And they would say that we're just going to, it was really stupid. They just said, we're just going to do it anyway. It goes, no, no, no. You have, I recommend people go and find this video because it actually was pretty good. It's probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. If he's thinking about the one that I saw, and it sounds like he is. There's they don't have an answer to this, and he goes on to ask, people ask, and I've done this too. People ask the Venus Project is one of those things where it's wrong on so many levels that you can't even do a comprehensive video about it. It's wrong on every fundamental assumption that they agree, like that there's no the world has plenty of resources and scarcity is artificial. That's wrong. That like every component of that philosophy is wrong. And so to make like a refutation would be so hugely difficult. And the thing is, when you make arguments, they just respond, well, I just think it would be nice. He says, if you bring up the economic calculation problem, which is a perfectly pertinent question to ask, they don't have an answer. It's funny. He says Peter Joseph and this other guy say, well, they've read a lot of Mises. Okay, if you read Mises and you have a way to solve this problem, then you should be able to explain how you're going to get around it. All right, it's not enough to say, okay, it's like if I said Marxism, the Venus Project is pure bullshit. It will never work. And they said, okay, how? And like, I don't need to say how. I watched Zeitgeist, and so I don't need to say. That's basically saying I don't know the answer, and I'm just hoping that you'll be thrown off course by the fact that I said that I've read it. So then he goes on to say, I have a science degree. My question is, what do you think if someone claims this? Do you think that someone who supports the Venus Project, despite understanding the calculation problem, is being intellectually dishonest? Okay, I don't think very many people in the Venus Project have any understanding of the calculation problem, because when I've asked them to try and explain it or to demonstrate that they know what they're talking about, they usually can't. People in the Venus Project are guided primarily by emotion. They are imagining a utopia that is going to be built by magic robots and by messianic figures like Jack Fresno and Peter Joseph. And when you start talking about the Mises and calculation and incentives, it's just to them it's just shitting in their punch, and they don't like it, and they just want to be in this hazy euphoria of imagination. And so I don't think hardly any of them understand the calculation problem. And the higher up ones like Peter Joseph, maybe he does, but he's in a position where he's so narcissistic and he's making a whole legacy based on the Venus Project that he cannot admit that he's wrong. This is kind of something that I think Stefan does a little bit, although not with such enormously disastrous and ridiculous consequences. And there's no comparison of the two. I shouldn't have made that. Yes, their love of science, but they engage in rampant scientism. There's nothing in science that tells you what to value or what not to value. There's no scientific basis for saying that I should value X amount of healthcare relative to Y amount of housing. None. None. There's none. We have to assume that I value my health a certain amount relative to housing before we can start. Science tells you how, not why or if. There's no amount of science that tells you how much I should value aesthetic things like listening to music versus good food. Should I have the highest quality food imaginable, or should I have less quality food but a Stradivarius violin? These are the common everyday choices, and you can see not that example, but these are the um, cost-benefit analyses choices that people make every day millions of times, and there is no scientific answer for it. There's no, the correct answer is that you should have this many square feet to live in and this much beachfront property, and none. And without that, the Venus Project is pure bullshit. And, usually I've gotten them to the point where they'll be like, okay, fine, it can't give you whatever you want. It can't give you whatever anybody wants. What it's assuming is that you have a certain set of values, and it will provide you for those. And if you don't have those values, fuck you. You don't get what you want. And the thing is that's explicitly based on continental planning of the entire continent. So it's not enough to be like, can I just go and have my own farm and be my own, not bother you? That's not good enough, because they're going to say no, because we need all that acreage to make the Venus Project work. So we're going to take it, and it's not coercion because we're doing it for your own benefit. So they are some of the worst people I can imagine. They're the type of people that anger me so much. I tell them if they ever come to my house for the common good, they're going to get a face full of lead. So next question. I mean, the Venus Project, that would be just take forever. I think I have made videos about it, but they just get down thumbed, and I mean the people on there are so conceited. They don't know shit. They haven't read anything, but they think they know everything. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know. It's like your expanding knowledge just shows you that there's a more perimeter of unknown, and the more you fill in the spaces, the more spaces you realize there are. The Venus Project people are the exact opposite. They watch a 3-hour documentary, and suddenly they understand everything about the entire world and its entire history and its entire trajectory through into the future. They can predict the future, and it's like how it appeals to a certain type of person, and it's not the type of person I am. So, what is the English meaning of the Icelandic term lengthy unithur? How is lengthy unithur written in the Icelandic alphabet? I don't know, because I don't. Well, I could spell it out phonetically, but because it's a pretty phonetic language. But did you expect me to write that out in a YouTube video? No. Have you read Stefan Molyneux's book, Universally Preferable Behavior, A Rational Proof for Secular Ethics? If so, what do you think of the theory? I have not read it. I watched him debate Ex Omniverse about it when it first came out. I think he overrates his contribution. I think he's a smart guy, and he's made some very eloquent justifications and arguments for liberty, but I don't think that one's one for the ages, no. And I apologize if I didn't say more as to why. I just think I just was a hypocrite there, because then I just accused Venus Project people of doing that. Yes. Oh well. How long do you think it will be before people accept volunteerism, anarchism, as morally right and appropriate to implement? I suspect that the collapse will need to occur first, as the dependence on the state will value their handouts. Okay, first of all, people have already started to do that. You and I, and thousands or maybe even low millions of people have already done this. As I said earlier, I think that it will take the state. The state is going to probably swallow our ranks through its incompetence / malice, or some combination of the two. Yeah, the people who are on handouts, they are in trouble. They are incentivized to be dependent on the state, and also I think it does affect their psychology to a point where they become insecure, and without that, it's kind of like an umbrella that they get used to, a safety net. They suddenly feel, and I have a father who's in a union, so he basically has worked his entire life and cannot get fired. And he's never had a job other than like when he was in high school working at the local, fast food place or whatever, that wasn't like that. And he can't even conceive of not having that security. And I've known lots of people in the military that's the same way. They get out, and in the military you're basically a slave, but they typically, unless you commit some horrible crime, they don't fire you. And even if you do commit, I mean, actually, if you commit lots of horrible crimes, you might get a medal. That's a whole other story. But like, they come out and then they try and get their old job back at a gas station or whatever, and they can't hack it. There, it's just too. That's too weird. And like with me, I've never had a job where I couldn't get fired at any month. In fact, I don't even have a contract right now. My boss still pays me and gives me raises because he needs me. And to me, it's like that makes me feel really valuable. I don't need some collective bargain to be, useful. But a lot of people are dependent on the state, and those people are going to have it really rough, and they're going to make it rough for us. But look, they're going to have to get on their own 2 feet, and they probably will really quick. If all that stuff just ended, 95 to 99% of the poor are working poor. They are capable of supporting themselves, and they will as soon as that they are not allowed to any longer. As soon as if they're not getting the dole anymore, they'll come out and they will start working. And that tiny there's a certain percent that can't, but that's the kind that always gets helped by private. Do I wait? Some people's very survival depends on the state. That's just a horrible position to put yourself in. Like morally, we can debate about it, but it's just a bad position to put yourself in. And I'm not. We can't justify the aggression of others to support your bad decisions. So, you could have chosen to have been. If you could have chosen, would you have been heterosexual? Do you feel that our society has reached a point where homosexuality is accepted in the sense that you can openly declare yourself to be gay without negative repercussions? Well, first of all, you're not entitled to not have negative repercussions for what you say. So I don't think that's like some element of society that I think that we need. Would I have chosen differently? I don't. I mean, I don't regret. I don't have any regrets. I mean, I don't think so. Well, who knows? I don't think it's that binary anyway. I think everyone's a little bit of both. Some are more than others, but uh, society is becoming very much more amenable to homosexuality by every rubric I've seen. I know homosexuals who are conservatives, who are active in like the Republican Party, and the social conservatives. They still exist, but they're just atheism isn't coming. It's not like religion's being destroyed, but social conservatism is being destroyed. It's being like eviscerated, and that's fine. I won't lament it, but I also am not encouraging it. I don't care if people want to be like socially conservative. That's fine. I don't need their like endorsement of my life, and I feel sorry for any gay person who thinks that they do. I'm not gay myself, but my friend says Ben Lowry is a handsome man. Would you agree with this? No. I like Ben. I hope he doesn't watch this and take offense, but he's just not my type. There's a certain kind of guy that I like, and usually it's real obvious. I mean, hey, I like that guy, and some of some of you are that type of guy, and you know that because I've told you so. And Ben seems like a nice guy, but I never felt anything for him. I mean, in that way. I'm not going to say anything more. Did working at KFC put you off food? I never worked at KFC. I own stock in KFC. I worked at Burger King and Krispy Kreme. Did it put me off the food? Yeah, you get tired of the food. Same question for Krispy Kreme. I never had a sweet tooth, so I was never into Krispy Kreme. But Krispy Kreme has cheap-ass donuts. There are other places that make better donuts. So, um, and then he asked if I know the secret spices. No, I don't. For KFC, I never worked at KFC. I worked at Burger King for like 7 or 8 years, off and on, but mostly on. And it gets a little old, yeah. I'm a huge fan of the work of Jeffrey Tucker. He is a gentleman and anarcho-capitalist. Yes, both of those are true. Have you read any of his books? No. What do you think of him? I think he's amazing. When I originally knew of him, I definitely underrated him. He's steadily risen in my estimation, and he may rise still. I just watched him in an interview talk about Murray Rothbard, and he increased. He got points again. So I have not read any of his books, though. And are you a member of Laissez-Faire Book Club? No. Keynesians claim that reduced aggregate demand is the reason for the economy unemployment. Do you know how they came up with this idea? No, I don't. Probably because Keynes said so. I should probably read the general theory. I probably will at some point. Do you support anarcho-capitalism because of moral arguments or the arguments from effects? Mostly arguments from effect, but I feel comfortable swimming in the moral arguments too. Not that I agree with them, but I just think if we're going to make moral arguments, I think libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism just fit into them with fewer contradictions than any other political philosophy I'm aware of. Would you move to South America? Yes, I've actually considered. There's a couple places in South America that I like to live in. Not the ones people most often mention, but there's a few. Another or another part of the world. Yes, there are other parts of the world. There's a few places in Africa I've considered, and obviously Iceland. This may seem counter to Austro-libertarianism, but bear with me, I live in the UK. Okay, he gives an anecdote about the NHS. And let me just say that as an anecdote. You don't know how much people were taxed to pay for that. What about the people who are taxed and never use the NHS? How is that fair? What about people who don't have a good experience? You know, this is basically he had a good experience with the NHS, so he's giving me his anecdote. It seems to work. Yeah, when something's tax funded, there's no way to know if it's really working. It's like saying I had a really good teacher in public school. That doesn't mean public schools are justified. There might be a great pedagogue, and he might work really hard. They might know what they're doing, but is it worth their salary? Is it worth the price of the upkeep of the entire building? Those are questions that cannot be answered because they're getting paid taxes. Same thing with NHS. Gosh, this was a long question. Dissident. We pay high taxes in the UK. That's for fucking sure. We pay. I mean, we have it bad here, but not quite as bad. He goes on. These aren't questions. So my question: do you think it's moral for doctors to withhold treatment? If doctors are obligated to provide treatment, then doctors are slaves, and I am against slavery. Hippocratic oath means they do no harm, but not helping somebody is not doing them harm. You know, like if someone came to me and they said, well, can you do surgery on this person? I said, no, I can't. That I'm not harming them. Even if I had the skills to give them the surgery, that wouldn't mean I'm harming them. He references the fact that the NHS is not taking care of old people. That's been in the news in the UK quite a bit. So, yeah, and they're incentivized not to because they don't pay taxes, so why would they waste tax money on them? Do you think the people like Max Kaiser and Webster Tarpley are slowing down the spread of libertarian ideas or not affecting it at all? I don't think that they're slowing it down. I don't know that much about Max other than he's a grating personality. Tarpley he's crazy. Is he the guy who's pro FDR? He's not in the libertarian movement. He's a frequent guest on Alex Jones' show, and beyond that, I don't think he has anything to say. And that's it. And this video is itself 1 hour and 2 minutes long, so I guess I'm going to find out whether I can upload videos this long. But that's it on the questions. Sorry if it's perfunctory. There's no way some of these can be answered in this amount of time. But like I said, I'm probably going to be gone for a while. I can't upload videos when I'm in Utah, and I'll probably be too busy to anyway. So, sporting the Obama God shirt. All hail the God King. And the books. Ta-da! And that's it.